The Kensington estate had never seen chaos like this. 18 of the world's most decorated physicians crowded into a nursery that cost more than most people's houses. Their white coats moved in frantic blurs under crystal chandeliers. Heart monitors screamed. Ventilators hissed with mechanical desperation. A team from Johns Hopkins barked orders at specialists flown in from Geneva. A Nobel laureate in pediatric immunology wiped sweat from his forehead and whispered what no one wanted to hear. "We're losing him." Baby Julian Kensington, heir to a $40 billion empire, was dying. $50,000 an hour in medical expertise couldn't tell anyone why. Hello friends, welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. His tiny body had turned the color of twilight. Blue lips, blue fingertips, a strange mottled rash creeping across his chest like an accusation. Every test came back inconclusive. Every treatment failed. Every theory collapsed under the weight of reality. Through the servant's entrance window, pressing his face against glass that had never been cleaned for someone like him, stood Leo, 14 years old, son of the night shift housekeeper, wearing a coat 3 winters too thin, shoes held together with prayer and stubbornness. He'd spent his whole life being invisible on this estate. The boy who walked the edges, who noticed everything because no one ever noticed him. Right now he was staring at the potted plant on the nursery windowsill, the one that had arrived 3 days ago with a gold bow and congratulations card, the one that had left an oily yellowish residue on the gardener's gloves that had touched the baby's crib railing during yesterday's cleaning, the one that every genius in that room had walked past 17 times without a second glance. Leo's hands trembled because he knew what it was. His grandmother, who'd healed half of Kingston's poorest neighborhood with nothing but herbs and faith, had taught him to recognize that leaf pattern before he could read. Digitalis, devil's trumpet, angel killer. The doctors were about to cut that baby open, looking for answers. The answer was sitting in a ceramic pot wrapped in a bow. Leo looked at the window, then at the security guard making rounds, then at his mother's face through the kitchen door. The woman who'd warned him 1,000 times. Stay invisible, stay safe. Don't give them a reason to throw us out. He thought about what would happen if he was wrong. Then he thought about what would happen if he was right and did nothing. Leo pulled his coat tight, took a breath that tasted like fear and determination, and ran toward the impossible. Leo had learned to walk without making sound by the time he was 6 years old. It wasn't a skill anyone taught him. It was survival. When you lived in the groundskeeper's cottage at the edge of a billionaire's estate, a cottage so small it could fit inside the Kensington family's walk-in closet, you learned quickly. Your existence was tolerated, not welcomed. You learned to move like smoke, to breathe like a secret, to become so small, so quiet, so utterly forgettable that the wealthy people floating through their marble lives never had to be inconvenienced by the reminder that you were alive. His mother, Grace, had worked for the Kensington family for 11 years. She'd started when Leo was just 3, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees while pregnant women in designer gowns stepped over her like furniture. She'd worked through 2 miscarriages, a bout of pneumonia that nearly killed her, and the slow death of every dream she'd ever had. All so Leo could have a roof and food. "We are blessed," she would tell him every night, her voice soft with exhaustion and something that might have been faith or might have been denial. "Mr. Kensington lets us live here. He pays for your school books. We are blessed, Leo. Don't ever forget that." Leo never argued with her, but he also never forgot the way the Kensington children looked through him when they passed. Like he was made of glass, or maybe just air. He never forgot the time Arthur Kensington III had fired a gardener for making eye contact with him during a business call. He never forgot the sign on the main house's service entrance. Staff must use rear access. Visible presence on main grounds prohibited during family hours. Blessed? Sure. The Kensington estate sprawled across 47 acres of manicured perfection in the hills above the city. Gardens designed by celebrity landscapers, fountains imported from Italy, a hedge maze featured in 3 architectural magazines. There was a tennis court, a helicopter pad, a swimming pool shaped like the family crest, a 12-car garage filled with vehicles that cost more than most people's houses, a wine cellar that held bottles older than Leo's grandmother would have been if she'd lived. Leo knew every inch of it, not because he was allowed to explore. God, no. He knew it because he'd spent his entire life watching from the margins, from the tiny window of the groundskeeper's cottage, from behind the rhododendron bushes when he was supposed to be walking to the bus stop, from the shadows of the service corridor when he snuck in to bring his mother her forgotten lunch. He'd mapped the estate in his mind the way other kids mapped video game levels. He knew which security cameras had blind spots. He knew which doors were left unlocked during the 3 o'clock shift change. He knew that the head of security, a thick-necked man named Briggs, took a 20-minute smoke break behind the pool house every afternoon at 4:15. He knew these things because knowing them made him feel like he had some kind of power, in a world that constantly reminded him he had none. 3 months ago, Eleanor Kensington had given birth to a baby boy, Julian Arthur Kensington IV, the heir, the prince, the future of a dynasty built on tech patents and pharmaceutical acquisitions, the kind of generational wealth that most people couldn't even conceptualize. The baby had arrived in a flurry of magazine covers and society announcements. A professional photographer had been hired to capture his first moments. A team of night nurses rotated in 8-hour shifts. A nutritionist had been flown in from Switzerland to consult on Mrs. Kensington's diet to ensure optimal breast milk composition. Leo had watched it all from his usual place, the shadows, and somewhere along the way something had shifted in his chest. He'd started timing his walks to school, so he passed the nursery window at sunrise, when the nurse would hold Julian up to see the morning light. He'd started lingering near the kitchen entrance when he knew the baby would be taken for his afternoon stroll. He'd started feeling something he couldn't quite name, a strange, aching tenderness for this tiny person who had everything Leo would never have, but who also seemed so small, so fragile, so utterly unaware of the weight of the crown he'd been born wearing. Maybe it was because Julian was innocent. Maybe it was because Leo remembered what his grandmother used to say. Every child comes into this world pure, baby. What happens after, that's on us. Or maybe it was because Leo understood in some bone-deep way that he and Julian were both prisoners of circumstances they hadn't chosen. Julian would spend his life in a golden cage, performing for cameras and shareholders and a father who saw him as a legacy rather than a person. Leo would spend his life in the margins, invisible and uncounted, his potential measured only by how well he stayed out of the way. 2 boys, 2 prisons, same estate. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Leo first saw the plant. He was walking back from school, taking his usual route along the service road that ran behind the mansion's east wing. The autumn air was sharp with the smell of dying leaves and approaching rain. Leo had his coat pulled tight against the chill. The same coat he'd been wearing for 3 years now, the one with the fraying sleeves and the broken zipper his mother kept promising to fix but never had time for. A delivery van was parked near the service entrance. This wasn't unusual. The Kensingtons received deliveries, constantly rare wines, custom furniture, organic baby food flown in from overseas, but this one made Leo slow down. The delivery man carried a plant, tall and striking, its dark green leaves shimmering with an oily sheen. Pale bell-shaped flowers hung in clusters, white streaked with bruised purple. A gold bow wrapped the pot, a card tucked among the stems. Old Mr. Harrison signed for it. When his fingers brushed the leaves, they came away slick and yellowish. Leo saw Harrison frown, rubbing his gloves together, unsettled. Something about the plant was wrong. But then the delivery man said something, and Harrison laughed. The moment passed. He carried the plant inside, presumably toward the nursery, where all the baby gifts were displayed. Leo was left standing in the shadows with a strange unease coiling in his stomach. He knew that plant. He couldn't remember from where. Not exactly. But something about those leaves, those flowers, that oily residue. It tugged at a memory buried deep in his mind. His grandmother's voice, maybe from those summers he'd spent with her in Jamaica before she passed. She'd taught him about plants the way other grandmothers taught their grandchildren about baking or knitting. She'd walked him through her garden, pointing out which leaves could heal and which could kill, which flowers were medicine and which were poison dressed in pretty colors. The devil's most beautiful work, she used to say, is always wrapped in something lovely. You have to learn to see past the beauty to the danger underneath. Leo stood there for a long moment, that unease growing heavier with every breath. He thought about going to find his mother. He thought about knocking on the service entrance and telling someone, anyone, that something about that plant felt wrong. But who would listen to him? He was nobody, the maid's son, the shadow boy. He didn't even exist in the Kensington's world, except as a minor inconvenience to be managed. So Leo did what he always did. He swallowed his instincts, buried his unease, and walked back to the cottage to start his homework. 3 days later he would realize that decision almost cost a baby his life. The sirens came at sunset. Leo was sitting at the wobbly kitchen table, working through a geometry problem he didn't really care about, when he heard them. Distant at first, then growing louder, closer, more urgent. He went to the window and watched as 3 ambulances came screaming up the private drive, followed by a convoy of black SUVs and 2 helicopters that descended onto the lawn like mechanical birds of prey. His mother burst through the cottage door minutes later. Her face was white, her hands shaking. "Something's wrong with the baby," Leo's mother gasped as she reached for her uniform. "They're calling doctors from everywhere. I have to go." She was gone before Leo could speak. He stood at the cottage window for hours, watching the mansion burn with light. White-coated figures rushed past the nursery window. Shadows of panic spilled across the perfect lawns. Beneath the fear and confusion, one thought kept surfacing in his mind like a drowning body: the plant. Leo crept closer, slipping through the hedges while security was distracted. From behind the fountain, he had a clear view into the nursery. What he saw froze his blood. Baby Julian lay at the center of chaos, swallowed by machines Leo couldn't name. Tubes threaded his tiny arms. Monitors screamed as his heartbeat faltered. His skin had turned a bruised gray-blue, blotched with a spreading rash. He looked like a child already slipping away. Doctors arrived in waves, one ambulance after another. Leo counted them as they came. White coats filled the room, hands moving fast, voices sharp, confidence cracking as treatment after treatment failed. From the shadows, Leo watched a baby die and knew, with sickening certainty, why. Black cars and helicopters delivered an army of medical royalty onto the Kensington lawn. Leo heard his mother whisper their names in awe: world-famous doctors, Nobel nominees, legends of modern medicine. 18 of the greatest minds alive stood inside a $40 million nursery, armed with every resource money could buy. And they had no answers. Leo watched through the window as confidence collapsed into confusion. Antibiotics failed. Antivirals failed. Genetic tests led nowhere. Each theory rose with certainty and died in silence. Arthur Kensington clutched his wife's hand, stripped of power for the first time in his life. Their baby was dying, and wealth meant nothing. But Leo saw what they didn't. The plant still sat on the windowsill, beautiful, poisonous, ignored. Doctors stepped around it, set charts beside it, never seeing it at all. Just decoration, just like him. His grandmother's voice returned with painful clarity. Devil's trumpet. Digitalis. The oils slow the heart. Even the air can poison a baby. The doctor searched inside Julian, but the enemy wasn't there. It was 3 feet from the crib, wrapped in a gold bow. When Leo saw them preparing for surgery, he knew it would kill the baby. He thought about his mother, about staying invisible, about walking away. Then he remembered his promise. Leo stepped out of the shadows and ran. Panic rippled through the mansion as Leo ran. He knew every hidden corridor, every servant stair the family never used. Security shouted behind him, radios crackling, boots pounding, but Leo was faster, driven by something fear couldn't stop. He burst into the nursery to find 18 doctors circling a dying baby. Julian's skin had faded to gray. The air smelled sweet and rotten. Leo knew that smell. "It's the plant," he shouted. "It's poison." No one listened. Guards grabbed him, dragging him away as Arthur Kensington demanded his removal. In that moment, something inside Leo snapped. He slipped free, scrambled forward, and grabbed Julian from the crib. Chaos exploded. Leo locked himself in the bathroom just as the guards broke through. On the counter sat activated charcoal, expensive, trendy, familiar. His grandmother's voice guided his hands. "Charcoal pulls poison out." He mixed it with water and fed it to the baby seconds before the door burst open. They tore Julian from his arms, accused him, pinned him to the floor, then silence. "He's picking up," a doctor whispered. Vitals stabilized. The rash faded. Shock replaced disbelief. Arthur ordered the guards off Leo. Tests confirmed it. The plant was toxic. Julian would live. Leo sat outside the nursery for hours, untouched, unarrested. A doctor finally bowed to him and said, "We were wrong." For the first time, Leo wasn't invisible. Not guards, but federal investigators arrived before dawn. Former FBI agents and forensic specialists who turned the mansion's east wing into a command center. Leo watched as they photographed the nursery and sealed the poisonous plant in evidence containers. When a detective finally asked him to meet Arthur Kensington, Leo's stomach clenched. Gratitude fades fast for people like him, or so he believed. Arthur waited in his study, exhausted and shaken. He revealed the truth. The plant was a gift from Marcus Webb, his former business partner and Julian's godfather. The poison had been shedding silently for days. Webb wanted revenge and chose Arthur's child to deliver it. The doctors never noticed. They never looked beyond machines. Leo had. "My grandmother taught me about plants," Leo said quietly. Arthur listened like a man learning humility for the first time. When Grace and Eleanor entered, fear and gratitude collided. Arthur acknowledged the truth aloud. The system failed, but Leo didn't. Then the billionaire did the unthinkable. He knelt before the maid's son and admitted his blindness. Justice followed swiftly. Webb was arrested. Walls came down literally. Fences removed. Power redistributed. A free clinic was announced, named for Miriam Carter. Scholarships. A home. An apprenticeship in botanical medicine. For the first time, Leo understood. His inheritance was never shame. It was destiny. She stood straighter now, her voice steady and sure. She was no longer just the maid, she was the director of community outreach, with an office, a staff, and a seat at tables that shaped thousands of lives. As crowds filled the once forbidden gardens, Leo realized how far everything had shifted. Families from nearby neighborhoods stood beside doctors from around the world. At the front sat Arthur Kensington, holding a healthy, laughing Julian, the baby who had nearly died. Arthur spoke first, his voice breaking as he admitted the truth. All his money and power had failed him. It was a 14-year-old boy and a grandmother's wisdom that saved his son. Knowledge he once dismissed as superstition had proven stronger than prestige. When Leo stepped forward, he abandoned his notes and spoke from the heart. He told them about his grandmother, Miriam Carter, uneducated by the world's standards, but rich in healing knowledge passed through generations. She taught him that knowledge was an inheritance no one could steal. That knowledge saved a life. Leo looked at the children watching him and told them the truth. Their backgrounds weren't weaknesses, they were strengths. This center existed to prove that no wisdom would be ignored again. As applause thundered, Julian toddled toward Leo and spoke his name. Leo lifted him, smiling through tears. A life saved. A bridge built. A legacy begun.